A Fistful of Dollars was the first entry of a spaghetti western trilogy by Italian director Sergio
Leone,
released in his native country on September 12, 1964. The second film, For a Few Dollars More, would follow on November 18, 1965, and a third soon fell into the works. The Good, the Bad and the Ugly was novelised in 1967 by Joe Millard, and then in 2008, The Good, the Bad, the Weird, a South Korean western film, was, if the title didn't make it obvious enough already, inspired by this picture. Stephen King himself also confessed that this movie largely inspired his Dark Tower series as well as the main protagonist. Upon its original release, the film was actually slated by critics mainly for its depiction of violence.
Leone
Defended this and claimed he intentionally exaggerated the deaths for pure satire reasons to parody run-of-the-mill western films at the time. It was around this era when spaghetti westerns were growing tiresome and became widely hated. Orson Welles himself even warned Leone to not make the film because of this. After the success of the second picture, United Artists approached the screenwriter Luciano Vincenzoni to sign off the rights and to give the third one a go-ahead.
Leone
Vincenzoni and the producer Albert Grimaldi had no plans for a third film, but regardless, the writer pitched an idea which the studio accepted and asked for a budget which would be agreed on as, at the time, quite an expensive $1.2 million. Once Leone added his own material into the screenplay, some comedic writers were brought on board, but most of their work was unable to be used.
Leone
claimed it was the grossest deception of his life. Apparently, their only contribution to the final screenplay was the opening, the very first line. The script was completed in just 11 days, but Vincenzoni soon left the project as he and
Leone
could no longer work together. The three main characters all contain autobiographical elements of the director, and filming began in Rome in the middle of May 1966. Filming would move to Spain and would finish in July that year. Much like his predecessors, Ennio Morricone was brought on to compose the musical score once again, and it's truly a mind-blowing piece of work that helps the viewer really become more engulfed in the action. Although, this sound effect is a little overused. Director Sergio
Leone
originally wanted Gian Maria Volonté cast as Tuco, but he turned it down to star in A Bullet for the General. Charles Bronson was offered this role also, but he turned it down in favour of The Dirty Dozen, which is when Eli Wallach was selected. Bronson was also considered for the role of Angel Eyes, as was Henry Fonda, Lee Marvin, and Enrico Maria Salerno. Clint Eastwood himself was not entirely pleased with the movie as a whole. First, he didn't like the script. In the first film, he was writing the picture solo. In the second, he had a co-star, but here he was one of three. He was concerned that it'd be upstaged by Eli Wallach, who played Tuco and took up a huge chunk of screen time. Furthermore, as production moved on, Eastwood demanded more money, raising his salary to $250,000, 10% of the profits once released in the United States, and another Ferrari.
No, that actually happened. He demanded another Ferrari.
In addition, Eastwood was a non-smoker and despised having to smoke cigars in the film. Director Sergio
Leone
was a massive perfectionist who always demanded more takes, and Clint even told him once, "You better make sure you get it this time, or I might actually be sick." By the end of filming, Eastwood had finally had enough of the director and could work with him no longer.
Leone
would do numerous takes from different angles, even if the tiniest of details ruined the frame, which is weird considering he didn't notice this guy walking in the background of the shot and messing it up. Or this car, and it would only exhaust his actors.
Leone
would offer Eastwood a role in Once Upon a Time in the West as Harmonica, which he actually personally travelled to Los Angeles to give him the script for, but Clint turned it down and the role went to Charles Bronson. Years later, during filming of Once Upon a Time in America, Sergio
Leone
finally got his petty revenge by mocking Eastwood's acting and claiming he was inferior to Robert De Niro, stating, "Eastwood movies are like a sleepwalker between explosions and hails of bullets, and he is always the same, a block of marble. They would never end up working together again." Even after the movie was completed and released, Clint Eastwood still wasn't happy with the picture, stating it was bloated rather than expansive, and the only fleshed out character was Tuco, and a fourth film was actually mentioned. The first two took place after the American Civil War, whereas this one is during it in 1862, serving as a prequel. Screenwriter Luciano Vincenzoni had confessed that he had actually written a treatment for The Good, the Bad and the Ugly 2, which would have taken place 20 years after the original, following Tuco and Blondie's grandson finding some gold. Eastwood himself, despite not liking the first one, expressed interest in participating, but Sergio
Leone
refused to allow it to happen. He didn't want the title or the characters to ever be brought back, nor did he want to direct another Western. The movie follows three main characters known as the Good, Eastwood, the Bad, Lee Van Cleef, and the Ugly, Eli Wallach.
I always wondered how they managed to cast the role of an ugly character.
Taking place during the American Civil War,
how is any war civil?
They're on the hunt for some hidden gold. Eli Wallach's character of Tuco knows the name of the cemetery where it's hidden, but Eastwood's character of Blondie knows the name of the grave. Van Cleef's character of Angel Eyes kinda just tags along for the ride, but the character development really grows and there's a lot to cover, so bear with me here. I must agree with Eastwood that Tuco is the most interesting character by far. At the start of the picture, he's a felon on the run and Eastwood saves him from many hangings to raise the stakes in his head, only to screw him over, which bites him on the tuchus in return when Tuco becomes one of the most evil villains of all time. However, they soon realise that they kind of need each other, and over the course of the 3-hour running time, they have more of an on-again, off-again relationship than me and my father.
I don't want to talk about it.
He constantly screws Eastwood over and then tries to make amends, and he really is the highlight of the film.
I can't while you're watching me.
And he fell for that? He deserved to die.
I had lots of time to learn how to shoot my left.
Shot to death by a man in a bubble bath. That's gotta be embarrassing.
When you have to shoot, shoot, don't talk.
This line wasn't actually scripted, and as soon as he said it, the entire crew burst into laughter, and
Leone.
just decided to keep it in the film. To be fair, I feel like it's perfectly good advice for any villain ever in movie history. In the gun store, everything actor Eli Wallach does is actually improvised. He didn't know much about guns, so he was directed to just do whatever he wanted, including putting the sign in the guy's mouth, all unplanned. Although the scenery here is incredible, he runs like a girl.
Well, he does.
Here, when Tuco is running through the cemetery, a dog runs into the bottom of the frame. This was improvised by the director who let the animal loose, so Wallach's reaction is genuine shock. The skeleton Tuco discovers in the wrong coffin was actually real. A Spanish actress wrote in her will that she wanted to act even after her death.
To be fair, what better film to star in after you die than this one?
Eastwood is just pure badass and really emanates awesomeness with every single word spoken.
Yeah.
God, you're so cool.
Offset, actors Eastwood and Wallach were actually quite close. So much so, when filming in Madrid, all of the hotels were full, so Clint offered him a place to stay and they ended up sharing a bed. Wallach's wife claimed he can now brag about being the only man who can say that he slept with Clint Eastwood. The film focused more on direction and lighting than dialogue. Sergio
Leone.
himself confessed to not being a huge fan of the talking, which is evident as there is no line of dialogue until 10.5 minutes into the film, which can actually look rather uncomfortable at times.
Leone.
Focused a lot on close-ups of people's faces or their weaponry, which is relatively unique at the time, and it really built the tension impeccably well. The musical score is astounding and truly one of the most mind-blowing soundtracks I've ever heard in my entire life. Furthermore, the third act when they close in on the gold is incredibly gripping and you can't help but be on the edge of your seat throughout. It was a huge inspirational sequence which really reminded me a lot of the closing act of Blood Diamond. If it was inspired by it or not, I'm not sure, but the final shootout scene has been mimicked and parodied to death, and its impact in cinema history was obvious. Literally, the third act had my heart racing and I was so engrossed in it. The great direction complemented by the tremendous editing, it really built up the tension and you just can't look away. The epic scene where the bridge explodes,
Huh? I really thought that one was gonna explode.
although it looked great, it had to be done twice. The first time, some of the crew misunderstood direction and prematurely set off the explosions when the cameras weren't even rolling and it needed to be rebuilt and done again. That same sequence also came very close to ending the career and possibly life of Clint Eastwood himself. As the explosion's made, a huge piece of shrapnel hurls directly towards his head and is only stopped by a lucky sandbag right next to his skull. Also, why is Tuco hiding like this? Isn't that the worst way to die?
I don't know about you, but I'd hate to have death by rock up my ass on my gravestone.
This actually isn't the only time one of the actors came within inches of death during production of the film. In the scene where Tuco uses a train to detach himself from some handcuffs, the crew were unaware of some heavy iron steps that reached out about a foot from each boxcar. If Eli Wallach would have lifted his head up just a little bit at the wrong time, he would have been decapitated clean off. Wallach insulted
Leone.
for not taking proper precautions for the safety of his actors for instances like this, and another one where Wallach again was supposed to be hanged until the rope was shot and the horse gallops off. However, the animal was scared too much and ran too fast, far with Eli's arm still bound behind his back. He only managed to survive by holding on with his knees for dear life.
And these weren't the only time that Wallach almost died during filming.
During a night shoot, a technician had accidentally set down a bottle of acid next to Wallach's bottle of soda.
Who the hell would put some acid next to some soda and think that that's a good idea?
Naturally, you can guess what happened, and Wallach soon fell ill. Audio was also an issue. It was common practice in Italy at the time to film the movie and dub all audio in post, and that's exactly what was done here. Unfortunately, it's very noticeable when the dialogue doesn't match the lips of the actors. Each person spoke in whatever native language they were comfortable in, which caused issues here as Luigi Pistilli, who played Tuco's brother Pablo, couldn't speak English.
Leone.
Himself also didn't speak much of it, and Eli Wallach didn't speak much Italian, so they had to communicate in French. This scene where Angel Eyes beats up Maria for information on Bill Carson, actor Lee Van Cleef refused to strike a woman. The actress Rada Rasimov assured him that it was fine and she's an actress, so even if he were to hit her for real, it was fine. He still refused, and a stunt double was used. The imagery is just astounding. Not only are the sets incredibly well made, but the scenery is gorgeous, which
Leone.
captures magnificently. It's just beautiful to look at. Some of the visuals are so dark and chilling, but they really capture your attention. The makeup on Eastwood here is incredibly impressive, and I mean that with all sincerity, especially for its time. It's shown later on with gun wound victims as well, and I can't credit them enough. Clint Eastwood, even during his moments of death, is still incredibly badass.
Don't be.
However, sometimes his badassity comes across as quite silly. I mean,
Why is everybody in this film incredibly light sleepers?
Sure would like to put your paw on it, huh?
here, Clint whistles to capture their attention before shooting. Why did he even whistle? Imagine if it backfired. Although, calmly lighting a cannon with his cigar, can you get any more awesome than that? I mean, during the final shootout before it happens, it's clear that they need Clint alive as he's the only one who knows where the gold is. So I don't quite understand why he doesn't just shoot them both and take the money for himself. He clearly doesn't have an issue killing people, so it can't be because he's billed as the good one.
But who cares? The ending was awesome.
There's a scene where Tuco gets the daylight kicked out of him while an orchestra performs a calm and gentle tune at the same time. It was such a unique sequence for its era and is beautifully edited together. In fact, why doesn't Angel Eyes just kill him? It literally makes no sense to drag him out onto a train for this big Neanderthal to throw him off instead of just shooting him. A lot of stuff seems to happen by chance though. I mean, twice Clint Eastwood's life is saved at the last minute by pure coincidental timing. Later on, he and Tuco mention that they need explosives and then just happen to find some immediately after.
What are the odds?
Visually and musically entrancing and easily one of the finest pieces of work I have ever seen. If you've not seen it, I'd recommend you do so as soon as you get the chance.